look at Matthew chapter 25 because this morning I want to talk about faithfulness. It's not something we hear about very often in our churches. But I'm going to slip something in here. Matthew chapter 25. I'm going to slip something in while you're searching the scriptures and ask you a question. Who can I ask? I'll ask Bernard. He's right in front of me. When do you stop paying your bills? Never. Never stops paying his bills. Why? Because he has to faithfully pay them. Now, if you go away on holiday, do you still have to pay your bills?
Yes.
Right. Good question. Good answer. My point is, when people are away, do they still pay their tithes and their offerings? Think about it. Because I'm going to talk about faithfulness. And if we're going to be faithful, I'd love to be able to say to Birmingham Council, or who's our Octopus, this is our energy supplier, I'd love to say to them, oh, by the way, I'm away for the next 2 weeks, I'm not paying you any bills. Wouldn't you? Why is it that in the church, when people are away, they forget that they have to still pay their tithes and their offerings? Have you ever who's ever thought about it? You've got quiet, haven't you? I tell you what I do. You know, I bear in mind I've been brought up, and I'm not asking for your money, okay? I've been brought up in the church for a long, long time. When I go away, you will always find my tithes and offerings are left in the office. It doesn't matter if I'm away for a week or 2 weeks. I'll either pay my tithes beforehand or I'll pay them afterwards. Because this morning, I want to speak about faithfulness, and faithfulness is part of your giving. Is that right? Now don't look at me with such a gloom face, because I've mentioned money and tithing. But you know what? Your tithes actually not only just pay for the bills that go on in the church, but it pays for the missionaries that we support. Now, only this week, I have just sent £150 to a missionary organisation that we support through your tithes and offerings. So if you don't contribute, they don't get their funds, do they? Just bear that in mind next time you're away or you're on holiday. Think to yourself, should I be paying my tithes or not? And the answer is yes. And I could talk to you all morning about finances and the importance of tithing, because I guarantee you that not many Christians actually tithe like they should. But that's another subject. And every time I speak on money, people get a little bit defensive. But it's not, because at the end of the day, it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to him. We're just stewards of the finances. Is that right? So let's have a look at Matthew chapter 25. And Jesus was talking about the kingdom of heaven. Now, I'm not going to talk about that, but when you look at that particular parable, Jesus illustrates 3 things, or 3 different groups of people. The first one, the one who had 5 talents, then he gave 2 talents to somebody, then he gave 1 talent to somebody. They all had a choice what to do with that talent. Same as you have a choice what to do with your finances. And the Bible says that the man went away, and I know he talks about the kingdom of heaven, but he went away on a journey. And the Lord came back after a long time. After a long time, the Lord of these servants cometh and reckoned with him. And he began to ask those who had had the 5 talents. He said to him, I've given you 5 talents, what have you done with them? And he said, I have actually gone and traded with them and made you, made you 5 more talents. In other words, he put whatever he had been given to use, and he got 100% in return. And he said the same to the man who had got 2 talents. Now, think about this. The person who had got 2 might have thought, well, why has he got 5 and I've only got 2? But he didn't. He went away and he made another 100%. The person who had got 1 said these words. He said, I thought you were a hard man, and I went and I hid my talent. And the Bible actually says in verse 21, his Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, I will make you ruler over many. Enter thou into the joy of my Lord. He also that received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Now the person who had received 1 was actually thrown into outer darkness because he wasn't faithful in the very small thing that his Lord had given him. Now I don't know about you, but I want to be as faithful as I possibly can in whatever God has laid upon me to do. Because I want to hear those words when I get to heaven, well done, thou good and faithful servant. And when we look at that passage, and we could go into it a whole lot more, but I'm not going to, because I want to speak about God's faithfulness. Now, we've just been singing a song just a few minutes ago, that he's never failed me. And you know, when you analyse some of the choruses that we're singing, they're not quite what they should be. But because he's never failed me, is there, and I'm only throwing a wobbly into the works as it were, is there a possibility that people think that God will fail them? And I'll say, I'm just throwing a spanner into the works to make you think. And I guarantee you that God will never ever fail you in any situation that you're in because of his faithfulness. And the Bible has a lot to say about God's faithfulness. Look at the children of Israel. I mean, let's face it, if I'd been in charge of them, I would have got some shotguns out. And I dare say you would as well. Complaining, murmuring, everything else, telling Moses that he was a rubbish leader, telling Moses that he'd only brought him out of Egypt to kill him in the wilderness. I mean, what sort of people do you want backing you up that make statements like that? No. You don't really, do you? I mean, let's face it, if you're going to do a job, you really want a bit of encouragement, don't you? No? I do. I want somebody to actually say to me, you know what, Kev? Thanks for doing that. I really appreciate it. And that encourages me then to be a lot more faithful in the next step that I'm going to take. So we see the children of Israel. There was a right grumpy bunch of people that the vast majority of people wouldn't even have tolerated. But because of God's faithfulness, and why was he faithful? Because he told Abraham in the very beginning that I'm going to bring you into a land that's going to be flowing with milk and honey, and your descendants will be like the stars of the sky and the sand of the sea. And if God ever broke his promise, he could never have been the faithful God that we know him to be. What did he do to the children of Israel? Well, let's have a look at a few things. He caused them to go across the Red Sea and brought the waves back to kill the Egyptians. He destroyed Pharaoh's army. Why? Because Israel deserved it? No, because of his faithfulness. And if there's one thing I want to speak on the church today is that each and every one of us, when things get tough, when things go difficult, when we think that there's no way out, that we just continue to remain faithful in the work that God has called us to do. And we can have the aches and the pains and everything else, and boy oh boy, we've had a few of those. But because of his faithfulness, I want to be more faithful to God than ever. Because of his faithfulness, he opened Sarah's womb. Think of it now. Something like 90 plus should never, ever been in a position to have a baby. But God said that I'm going to bless your seed. Now, he never said, I'm going to bless the seed of the servant girl. He said, I'm going to bless your seed along with Sarah. And we see, don't we, that God gave him a fantastic little boy. Sarah's womb was opened in her old age, and she had a wonderful son, who was what? A promised heir. Because of his faithfulness, he actually said, go and sacrifice your son. And what did the father say? He said, even if I sacrifice my son and I kill him, God will restore him back to life. Why? Because of his what? Faithfulness. You see, we don't always understand the passages of scriptures when God talks about his faithfulness. There are some, what we would actually call impossible situations that we find ourselves in. But we come through them because of his faithfulness. And I could keep you here for hours talking about how faithful God has been, even when I haven't been faithful. Why? Because his word is always going to be proved true. I've just taken a few scriptures and a few examples. Because of his faithfulness, he delivered David in battle. He delivered him from Goliath. And Goliath, again, and you may not know this, but he was a very powerful person. Some biblical sources describe him as being between 6'9" and 9'9". So whichever measurement you want, and the Bible doesn't tell us, just what some Bible sources have said. But irrespective, even if he was 6'9", he would be right up here. David wasn't a tall person. Can you look? Imagine him looking up at David and saying these words to him. I'm going to give your head to the birds. Hang on a minute. I'm going to give your head to the birds. Did you hear what I said, Goliath? I'm going to give your head to the birds this very day. And I dare say, Goliath in all his pomp and all his glory, thought to himself, you have got no chance. You have got no chance. I was reading the other week about Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali made this statement. He said, I am the greatest. Remember Muhammad Ali? Most of us would remember him. I am the greatest. Look into my eyes and see, I have no fear of anybody. I'm going to knock Joe Frazier to the other side of this world. And the biggest shock in boxing history at that time was Joe Frazier actually beat Muhammad Ali. Remember? You may not remember, but it's there in history. Here was a man who actually said, you are not going to even come anywhere near getting to me. But Joe Frazier had other plans. And he beat him. And he won a fight that, in boxing terms, he should never have won. You see, sometimes we look at the enemy and we think of him as being such a big, powerful person, and we forget, because of God's faithfulness, he's already won the battle. Aren't you glad? Aren't you glad he's already won the battle? He's not going to win the battle. It's already been done. Calvary, 2,000 years ago, when he stretched his hand out and he said these words, it is finished. So David, he never looked at Goliath as being a 6-foot+ person. He looked at him as being the enemy of Israel. And your looks will actually determine whether you get the victory or not. You can look at an enemy and think to yourself, I've got no chance. Or you can look at an enemy and say, because of God's faithfulness, I'm going to win. His faithfulness is so important. Because of God's faithfulness, He has delivered us from the very grips of sin, and He's given us a place in heaven. In John chapter 14, Jesus said these words. He said, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. That where I am, there you may be also. Because of his faithfulness, he's gone and preparing a place for us. And very soon, he's going to come to take us to be with him. Now, the Bible tells us that because God is faithful, we should also be faithful to him. And I thought to myself, what does that word faithfulness mean? What would you say faithfulness means? Anybody?
Loyalty.
Loyalty. Anything else?
True.
True. Well, we'll have a look what the dictionary says in a few minutes' time. But loyalty is a fantastic description. And so when we go back to the parable of the talents, the master tells the servants who were faithful that they would receive more than what they were given in the first place. They were permitted to enter into their master's joy. When we look at God's faithfulness, how do we measure up? How does he actually see us? He sees us obviously through his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, because the Bible tells us that. But how do we look to him? Are we really faithful in what he's called us to do? Are we really faithful in the work that he's asked us to do? God's faithfulness is so real. And I put down here, how can I be faithful to God and faithful to others? How can I, I'm only looking at me now this morning, how can I be faithful to God and faithful to others? You know, the biggest problem that we've had in our churches over a period of years is that the churches have said so much and done so little. And people no longer believe what the church says. And let me throw this one in. Christians have been some of the most unfaithful people going. I'm going to stop and let you think about that one. We need to keep our word. Is that right? As Christians, we need to keep our word. We need to be faithful in what we say and what we do. And if we can't do it, then say, I'm sorry, but I can't do it. I physically haven't got the capabilities of doing it. So I asked myself the question, if I'm going to be faithful to the Lord because he's faithful to me, how can I encourage others to be faithful? I'll give you an example. I can remember when we first started this church, we used to have a Wednesday morning prayer meeting. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning. Most unearthly hour of the day. And both Peter, my boy, Paul, my boy, and Peter, his friend, many a time before they went to school, used to come down to the prayer meeting. Peter now is involved in running the church, and Paul, my boy, is involved in Alpha and looking after a home group. Why is that? Let me just suggest something to you. Because of their faithfulness in coming to our prayer time, God began to open doors for them. It is so important that we, as it were, remain faithful in what God has asked us to do. We used to open our home when we first started this church. We'd open our home. We'd take all the furniture up. We'd get the chairs out from the garage. We'd put everything into the front room, and sometimes one person turned up. But the week after, we took all the furniture up. We got all the chairs out of the garage, and sometimes nobody would turn up. But because God saw our faithfulness in what he called us to do, and I'm only giving you some examples this morning, then God just opened the doors here for this church. We need more and more to be faithful in what God has asked us to do. Because of God's faithfulness, we've never run short. We've never been short. We've been in those situations where things haven't quite been as we want them to be, but we've never been short. Why? Because of his faithfulness. He wants you not only to be faithful in serving him, but in giving to him as well. I spoke to our trustees a few days ago, and I said, in March, when our financial year comes to an end, I want to increase our missionary offering. I want to start giving more away. Is that good or bad? I want to start giving more to missionary organisations. I want to start blessing other people more than what we've done before. You know, because in the first place as a church, we said to the Lord, Lord, although we're building a new church, we're still going to give our missionary offering every month. And we've done that for years upon years upon years, and we're still doing it now. Because of God's faithfulness, He cares for us, He leads us, He guides us, He loves us. Sometimes I can only talk for myself. I haven't always been as faithful as I should have been. But I know that He's never let me down. He's never turned His back on me. I was only hearing this week that a person who a long time ago used to be in this church turned his back on God, and he's had some major health issues only this week. And God spared him this week or last week. And he said these words, I need to get back to God. See, God has always been there. He's always been there. Why? Because of His faithfulness. He's always been there. And like the prodigal son, He's always been around. He's always been looking out for him. Now, it doesn't mean to say that we'll be perfect, because we still struggle in certain areas, don't we? We still struggle. But because of His faithfulness, He will always see us through. Sometimes in life we make poor decisions, don't we? Or don't we? We make poor decisions. Sometimes, and I'm just talking in general now, sometimes we've gone out with people that we should never have gone out with. Sometimes people, Christians, have married other people. I've got a friend of mine at the moment who's possibly in the process of being divorced. Should never have married the guy in the first place. Wouldn't listen. Now they're suffering for it. We have to be so careful who our friends are, because some of our friends will actually cause us to make poor decisions. But we need to trust Him always and try to follow His commandments, even when life is difficult. Look into Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16 verse 10 says these words, He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful in that which is much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. And really, what he's really saying here is we have to be faithful in everything that we do. In our jobs. Sometimes it's easy to cut corners, isn't it? You've never done that? It's easy to cut corners. But you know what? There's a process that we have to follow. And we need to be faithful in that process. We're to be faithful in marriage. We're to be faithful in friendships. Ecclesiastes gives us quite an insight into some of these things. Let's just turn to it, shall we? Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Verse 9 and 10. It says, two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labour. For if they fell, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. And really what he's saying here is, it's great to have a friend or a husband or a wife who will actually encourage you and will be faithful even when you make those mistakes. And if you think to yourself, well, I'm on my own, then get with somebody that you can trust. Get with somebody that you know you can share with, and then just ask them to keep you in prayer as you will pray with them. We have a WhatsApp group, and you know you can share some of the things on the WhatsApp, because together we can help each other. There's another great passage found there in Proverbs chapter 29, 27. It says these words, ointment, verse 9 and 10, ointment of perfume rejoice the heart. So does the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. Thine own friend and thy father's friend forsake not, neither go into thy brother's house in the day of thy calamity. For better is a neighbour that is near than a brother afar off. In other words, we need to have those people around us who will not judge us, will not condemn us, will not tell us where we're going wrong, as it were, but will be faithful and kind. And if we are going wrong, then make sure that when you do tell somebody they're going wrong, you do it in the right spirit. Just going to bring everything into an end. And so I put down here, I looked at what faithfulness actually means. It means steadfast. It means loyalty. It means somebody that isn't easily swayed. That's what faithfulness means. It means trusting him in all circumstances. It means following his commands. Our faithfulness to others means loving them even when it's difficult. Sometimes it's hard to love somebody when they've actually said things about you, isn't it? But you know, the Bible tells us that we have to be faithful. And Paul talks about restoring a brother in the scriptures. When our brother actually has done things that he shouldn't have done, we have to restore him in gentleness and in love. It means thinking well of them, no matter what is going on. The Bible calls us to be faithful as he has been faithful to us. And in closing this message this morning, ask yourself the question, if God wasn't faithful to me, where would I be today? I don't know about you, but I can actually tell you where I would be if God wasn't faithful to me. And if God proves himself to be faithful to us, shouldn't we be faithful to him? Now you may say to me, well, you've made me feel very uncomfortable this morning. Good. Because that's what we're supposed to do. Because we come into God's house to be challenged, don't we? And we're coming to be into God's house to be able to think about something and to say, Lord, am I really faithful in what you've asked me to do? And I know when I mention money, everybody goes quiet. But it's something that we need to think about. Am I being faithful in giving to the work that you've asked me to be involved in? Am I being faithful, Lord, in the finances that I'm bringing into the church? Or am I just putting a little piece in that I can spare? Faithfulness is a big, big subject. And I could talk about it for a long, long time. But I want to challenge each and every one of you, as I challenge myself, how faithful am I in what God's asked me to do? How faithful are you in what God's asked you to do? What's He asked us to do? He's asked us to gather together as a church. He said not to neglect ourselves as the manner of some is, and even more as we see the day approaching. It's no wonder so many churches are closing down, because Christians are no longer going to church. And that's a fact. It's no wonder churches are closing down, because Christians are no longer supporting the vision of the church. And I'm not talking about keeping thousands in the bank. I'm talking about being faithful in what God has asked us to do. I hope this morning there's some thoughts there that will make you think, as it makes me think. And I hope you have a good week. I pray that you'll be blessed, you're encouraged, and most of all, that you enjoy God's presence. So Father, I thank you for your word today. Thank you, Lord, that although it may be a message, Lord, that will challenge people, that, Lord, you'll cause us to think about it and cause us to ask the question, Lord, you've been faithful to me. Am I being faithful to you? In my time, in my finances, in my speech, in my commitment, am I being faithful? And Lord, if we're not, then please continue to reveal those areas of our life that we're not being faithful in. And Lord, just continue to strengthen, bless, minister and encourage. Bless each and every one this week. Pray, Lord, it'll be a tremendous week, Lord. That, Lord, they will see, Lord, as they make that decision to be faithful to you, then, Lord, they will see how good that you've been, even to them, Father, in Jesus' name.
Amen.